Shalom, my brothers and sisters. I hope you're well. Welcome back to Abantu Bible Academy, where we are continuing with our course, The Battle of the Age, which is between the Confederacy of Edom and the Commonwealth of Yisrael. We are preparing Yah's people for his return. We're in the middle of Module 1, where we are taking a deep dive into the Commonwealth of Yisrael. And we've reached topic 7, where we're going to talk about the division of the kingdom. But I'm going to focus on the kingdom of Ephraim because it has huge consequences on how this story develops. And one of the reasons why we had to start in Genesis, looking at how Jacob blessed Ephraim, was so that we can see the development of this kingdom, this northern kingdom, how it then becomes so idolatrous that Yah would eventually divorce the people. But later on, we'll see also that Judah will follow, and that will result in the complete destruction of the kingdom of Israel, as in the whole house of Israel. But we see that Yah always had a plan to restore us. So I hope this will be useful to understand the historical background of the demise of this kingdom. And when we get into understanding the other side, the Confederacy of Edom, you'll see that these are the people that Yah would bring to punish and discipline his people. Why this topic? In Matthew 15, we read the words of Yahusha, where he says, I was not sent but to the lost sheep of the house of Yisrael, meaning that he was only sent to the lost sheep of the house of Yisrael. The scattering of Ephraim, and then later on, the scattering of Judah, will be why, or the reason why Yeshua would be sent, as we will see as we get into it. And then I also wanted to talk about Ephesians 2, where we read, and I'm sorry, I started the animation on point 3, but we'll go to point 2 now. But in Ephesians 2, we read these words, remember you who were once Gentile in the flesh, called the uncircumcision by those who are called the circumcision. And then later on, the Apostle Paul will write, you were once alienated. You'll see this alienation and why it happened. You'll see also why the people of Israel, the northern kingdom people, will be Gentiles in the flesh because they would stop following the ordinances of Yahuwah, their God. And then the other reason, third reason, is when you read John 12, I think, we read about the Jews wondering about where Jesus said he was going to go. When they ask themselves, will he go to the dispersion among the Greeks? And that's because both the kingdom of Ephraim, the northern kingdom, and Judah later would be dispersed among the Greeks. But the initial dispersion was that of the northern kingdom. We'll see that progression as we get into the scriptures. We always want to remember that since we have now acknowledged that we were born into a war, we must therefore guard against deception in this war, because in war, truth is the first casualty. Truth is the first thing that is attacked, and it is attacked with propaganda, lies, deception, and all kinds of maneuvers that the enemy would bring onto the truth against it. So we are trying to root ourselves in the truth of the story of the Bible. Because when we do that, we can then defend against the truth. And this is where we are going. The Bible is a narrative with the beginning and the end. And the end, we learned, was declared in the beginning. What does the end look like? Genesis 27. This is Isaac speaking to Jacob, his son. Let peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Be master over your brethren, and let your mother's sons bow down to you. This is the end. This is the truth that the confederacy of Edom is fighting against. Now, I want us to understand what a narrative is. I know we've spoken about this quite a couple of times, but I think it is worth repeating so that we do not forget. So this is Google AI says a narrative is a structured story, account, or description of connected events, whether factual or fictional, presented through writing, speech, film, or song. Now, in our case, as we read through the scriptures, it was through writings. The speeches of the people of Yah were recorded and written down. Sometimes you have songs like we have in the Psalms, and the narrative is given or told in that way. It reads on and it says it organizes experiences into a sequence to convey meaning, usually featuring characters, a setting, and a conflict. Narratives can be personal, historical, or imaginative. What we have in the scriptures is a historical narratives with some personal touches to it, but never imaginative. Then it says key elements of a narrative. The plot, say the organized sequence of events, including a climax and resolution. And you see that when you go through the scriptures. And that is why we want to go through the narrative of the scriptures so that we can see this sequence of events. And you see that when you look at how the nation was divided, you see why. And you see one event following the other. Right? And then we all know about the characters, the individuals, the entities involved in the story, the setting, which is the timing and place where the story occurs. It has boundaries, right? This narrative. It happens in a particular place. Yes, sometimes it will go out to other places, but it will always come back. And the conflict, which is the central struggle or challenge that characters face. Sin, other enemies. Yah becomes also an enemy of Yisrael when they disobey. And then the theme, the underlying message or deeper meaning. And we'll see that at the end. So I hope when you look at the biblical narrative, you can identify these key elements so that you can enjoy the story. Enjoy the story. It's painful because you are involved, but when you see how it ends, you can enjoy the story. James says that consider it pure joy when you go through all kinds of tribulation or trials, right? Because you know that those things will achieve for you eternal salvation. Let's talk about this, the kingdom of Ephraim. Like I said, this is really about this conflict that happens between Yah and Solomon that leads to the kingdom being divided. All right, so let's get into it. In 1 Kings 11, we read about the idolatry of Solomon. From verse 4, it reads, "For it was so when Solomon was old that his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not loyal to Yah his Allure, as was the heart of his father David." Later on, it says, "So Yah became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned from Yah, the Allure of Yasharal, who had appeared to him twice. Therefore Yah said to Solomon, because you have done this, and have not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant." Now Yah raised up an adversary against Solomon, Hadad the Edomite. He was a descendant of the king in Edom. Mark this. Mark this. This enemy, the first enemy that Yah raises, is from Edom. From Edom. Remember, this is about the battle between the Confederacy of Edom and the Commonwealth of Yasharal. Just make a mental note there. But what's important, or the point that we're making here, is that it is because of the idolatry of Solomon that Yah starts to act. Again, can you see the sequence? An event happens, idolatry, and what happens? That follows after that idolatry is Yah bringing an adversary against Solomon. So cause and effect. That's the narrative part of the scriptures. Then we read on where we see now the kingdom being divided. Verse 26 of the same chapter. "Then Solomon's servant, Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, an Ephraimite from Zeredah, whose mother's name was Zeruiah, a widow, also rebelled against the king." Note the tribe. Jeroboam is from the tribe of Ephraim. Let's read on. "And this is what caused him to rebel against the king." Now, let's jump to verse 29. It says, "Now it happened at that time when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem that the prophet Ahiah, the Shilonite, met him on the way. And he, Abiah," yeah, I made a mistake there. I think it's Abiah even from the beginning, "said to Jeroboam, take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus say Yah, the Allure of Yasharal, behold, I will tear the kingdom of out of the hand of Solomon and will give 10 tribes to you. But he shall have one tribe for the sake of my servant David." I wanted you to mark that. We can talk about that later. "And for the sake of Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Yasharal. And I will afflict the descendants of David because of this, but not forever." Now, the reason I wanted to mark that with an asterisk is because Yah had promised an eternal kingdom to David. So he then preserved the tribe of Judah for that. But also you see that Yah says, "I'm going to afflict the descendants of David because of what you did, Solomon, but it won't happen forever." Okay, so he's talking to Jeroboam. He's talking about what he's going to do to the descendants of David because of what Solomon did. Can you see that? The narrative form of the scriptures. One event causing another. Let's move on. The idolatry of Ephraim. Because then Ephraim will also suffer the same fate as Solomon. We jump to 1 Kings chapter 12. We read in 25. "Then Jeroboam built Shechem in the mountains of Ephraim and dwelt there. Also he went out from there and built Penuel. And Jeroboam said in his heart, now the kingdom may return to the house of David. if these people go up to offer sacrifices in the house of Yah at Jerusalem, then the heart of these people will turn back to their Lord, Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they will kill me and go back to Rehoboam, king of Judah. Therefore, the king asked advice, made two calves of gold, and said to the people, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, O Yeshariel, which brought you up from the land of Egypt. And he set up one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan. Now, this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one as far as Dan. Now, let me show you what happened in a picture format, right? You see Jerusalem in the southern kingdom at the bottom, and you see the northern kingdom in green, ruled by Jeroboam, given by Yah to this man, Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, the Ephraimite. Now, when Jeroboam thought about the people going to Jerusalem to worship Yah, he thought, my goodness, these people are going to turn against me, and they're going to start to be loyal again to Rehoboam, the king of Judah. So he said, okay, let me build for them centers of worship so that they don't have to be traveling all the way to Jerusalem. And this is how I'm going to sell this idea that, hey, it is too much of you to be doing these trips 3 times a year as they were required. Let me build for you these centers of worship so that you don't have to go there in Jerusalem. So that's how Jeroboam led Yeshariel, the northern kingdom, into idolatry. Now, because of that, Ephraim was divorced, because that was adultery to Yahuwah. So in 1 Kings 14, we read, for Yah will strike Yeshariel as a reed is taken in the water. He will uproot Yeshariel from this good land which he gave to their fathers, and will scatter them beyond the river, because they have made their wooden images, provoking Yah to anger. And he will give Yeshariel up because of the sins of Jeroboam, who sinned and who made Yeshariel sin. You see that? Idolatry causes this divorce, really. And you see how this idea will progress. In Jeremiah 3, we read, then I saw that for all the causes for which backsliding Yeshariel had committed adultery, I had put away and given her a certificate of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah did not fear, but went and played the harlot also. So Jeremiah is now bringing in Judah. And he says Judah was supposed to learn from Yeshariel. He was supposed to learn that idolatry will lead to Yah divorcing you, also Judah, the same way that Yah divorced Yeshariel, the northern kingdom, and gave her a certificate of divorce. Why? Because they were unfaithful. They started to worship the gods that Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, set up for them in Dan and Bethel, and said to them, here are the gods who took you out of Egypt. That's how they became unfaithful, and Yah divorced them because of that. So Jeremiah is saying to Judah, hey, Judah, you must learn from your sister, Yeshariel, sorry. You must learn from your sister, Yeshariel. But Judah failed to do that. Now, let's complete this picture of the divorce of the northern kingdom, because in Hosea, we read in verse 5, my apologies for that, I think it's in verse 5, Hosea 1, you can find it there. It says, and she conceived again and bore a daughter. Then Alua said to him, call her name Lo Ruhamah, for I will no longer have mercy on the house of Yeshariel, but I will utterly take them away. Yet I will have mercy on the house of Judah. will save them by Yah, their Alua, and will not save them by bow, nor by sword or battle, by horses or horsemen. Now, when she had weaned Loruhama, she conceived and bore a son. Then Yah said, call his name Lorami, for you are not my people, and I will not be your God. I wanted us to make sure that we understand that Hosea is addressing the northern part. And it is obvious when you read the text where it says, yet I will have mercy on the house of Judah, on the house of Judah, right? The J and the Y are still there in my tongue, but over time they will go. I mean, the J. So Judah still has mercy from Yah, but Yah said, hey, I'm not going to have mercy on Yashara'el anymore. They're not going to be my people. But don't think that it ended that way, because in verse 9, you'll see Yah says, but later on, I'm going to marry them again, and they're going to be sons of the living God. But the point here is that Yashara'el's divorce is final. Hosea is saying that, helping us to understand that. But Ephraim will also then lose their heritage. We're still in Hosea. It says in verse 6 of chapter 4, my people are destroyed, this is Yah speaking, for lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I also will reject you from being my priest for me. Because you have forgotten the law of your God, I also will forget your children. So Yashara'el loses the heritage of being priest of the Most High. They lose their land because they're deported. You will see later. And you see what Jeremiah says in chapter 17. It says, the sin of Judah is written with a pen of iron, and you, even yourself, shall let go of your heritage, which I gave you. Now, you'll see that because of what happened to Yashara'el, the same thing will happen to Judah. Because now Judah is exposed. The kingdom is divided. The numbers are gone. They can't defend themselves. But spiritually, they also become prey to all kinds of idolatry. So you then end up with the whole house of Jacob, both kingdoms losing their heritage. And then, because of the idolatry, Judah is exiled. Not divorced, but exiled. Yah never divorced Judah. Yah never divorced Judah. But we read in verse 16 of 2 Chronicles 36, but they mocked the messengers of Alua, this is about Judah, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets, until the wrath of Yah rose against his people, till there was no remedy. Therefore he brought against them the king of the Chaldeans, who killed their young men with sword in the house of the sanctuary, and had no compassion on young men or virgin, on the aged or the weak. He gave them all into his hand. What I want us to understand, my brothers and sisters, over and above just understanding or seeing that there was a civil war, this fractured nation divided into two kingdoms, I wanted us to look at the end result of this idolatry. And that is that the whole house of Yashara'el is now destroyed. They have been scattered, Ephraim first, and then Judah later. Now, we know that Yah would bring the people of Judah back to the land, but after they rejected Yahusha, this would be what will happen to them. And these are the words of the man himself, the king of Yashara'el, Yahusha, Yeshua, some call Jesus. Verse 20 of Luke 21. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near. Then let those who are in the midst of her depart, and let not those who are in the country enter her. For these are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. For there will be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. And they will fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem will be trampled by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. This is what happened in 70 AD when the Romans destroyed the city and burned down the temple. This was Vespasian with his son Titus. Vespasian had to go back to Rome because there was some emergency, and he was crowned or installed Caesar there, and Titus is the one who finished the work. Titus is the one who then entered into the Holy of Holies. Titus is what brought this abomination of desolation that we spoke about in our previous lesson, topic number 6, I think. These are the Romans, my brothers and sisters, and we are still living under them because we are living under the times of the Gentiles, or living in the times of the Gentiles, under Gentile rule. They are trampling on Jerusalem as we speak. It was Judah, together with her sister Ephraim, scattered because we rejected the one that was sent for our salvation. But that's not the end, right? That's not the end. We'll see what happens at the end. But let's finish off this scattering, because what will happen is that in our lands of our scattering, Yah would then send us across oceans through ships into slavery. The book of Deuteronomy 28 said this in verse 68, and Yah will take you back to Egypt in ships, but the way of which I said you shall never see again. And there you shall be offered for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, and no one will redeem you. Your version of the Bible might just say no one will buy you, but the idea, the Hebrew scriptures would say redeem you, meaning that no one will buy your freedom for you. You will be slaves until Yah says it is enough, until Yah sees your repentant heart. And we'll look at that in our next lesson, I think. But what I want you to also notice is that one of the first ships, if not the first ship, that was sent from America, I think it was America or Britain, to take slaves from the coast, the western coast of Africa, was called Jesus. And here in Deuteronomy 28, we see that Yah says he will be the one who takes the people of Yashara'el to this place. Now, maybe they didn't know what they were doing. Maybe they were mocking Jesus. Maybe they were mocking the people that they were taking, in these ships. Maybe they knew that. In fact, not maybe. They knew that these people were Hebrews. This was prophecy being fulfilled in a way that Jesus, this sheep, will be the one who takes the first load of slaves to open up this transatlantic route. Fascinating. I hope you see the fascination. Fascinating. So this is how we were completely subjugated to the Gentiles, slaves all over the place, having started with the Arab slave trade 1,000 years before this, and then 1,000 years later, you see the transatlantic slave trade happening. Some of us, we escaped this the slave trades, and we ended up in the southernmost part of the continent, right? And that's where we find ourselves today. But our brothers and sisters are all over the place in the Americas, right? South America, the Caribbean, North America, somewhere. In Europe, some in Asia. And later on, through colonization, we were then subjugated again here in the continent, and some of us, had to go back to Europe, and that's why you find a lot of the diaspora in Europe. Jeremiah 15 will also emphasize what will happen to the people of Judah and their companions, Israel. It says, "And I will make you cross over with your enemies into a land which you do not know, for a fire is kindled in my anger, which shall burn upon you." Our brothers and sisters, our uncles, our aunties were taken across by our enemies. They crossed over with our enemies when some of us sort of escaped further to the south. Let's not forget where we are going. This is where we are going. Yah gave us this vision, and this is what we are working towards. I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, "Behold, the tabernacle of Yah is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. Yah himself will be with them and be their Alua, and Yah will wipe away every tear from their eyes." The tears that were caused by the affliction that Yah brought on us because of our disobedience. And he used the confederacy of Esau, which we will discuss in our next module. But we'll finish off these topics. I think we have 2 more weeks to go, and then we'll get into the confederacy of Esau. But let's not forget where we are going. We're going to this city. We are going to this beautiful city with golden streets, the New Jerusalem. So to God be the glory. We say Toda Rabbah to our Alua, Yahuwah, the God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Shalom.